village merchants put up a big screen that the Elsons had a coal bin back here, and they put this huge screen and they showed us movies. And we would just sit here on the street and on the side here and watch the movies on this big white screen. So that was a great thing, we thought.
And we even had popcorn during the movies. And I don't think we paid anything for the popcorn. I don't know where it came from.
I remember when the building was built, because I used to visit my grandmother, Bish, who lived up on the corner of Jewel and Church Street on the northeast corner. And we used to watch it go up. Oh, they had 2 stores downstairs to begin with and 2 apartments upstairs, as I remember, and a basement. You could go on weekend nights and you could have a good time. You know, raise all kinds of heck if you want to a limit.
Our dad bought the property, I think, in 1945. Easter Sunday of 1947, we opened up John's on the north side. There was a restaurant right next door to the bar room. That was a restaurant. And downstairs was a barber shop, because my dad was a barber also, and he always wanted a barber shop with his business.
When we were kids, this was a bank at one time, and then it was a bar at one time, and then what else?
Oh, it was heating and air conditioning and post office years and years ago.
The bar across the street that Herb Zier had was Winfield's first bank. A fellow by the name of Teamy started the bank.
My dad, you know, had a little groceries and sundries, what they call it, and a barber shop, and he would run a taxi if it need
Gas
be.
station.
And when he helped start the fire department in 1929, the first fire truck was housed in the garage there. It was like one building and a little apartment behind. And then in '32, when Prohibition ended, it became John's Buffet, and it became a tavern.
They only had the one truck. They didn't have a water truck at the time, because I remember this truck being in that garage, so to speak, next to Karwowski's.
Up front, the bar and the barber shop, and through 2 little French doors in the back we live.
There was a house.
It was a house. There was a platform out to the south, though, where they did take the baggage out and so forth, and also receive it from the train. That fence and so forth wasn't there.
As a kid, I didn't realize the historical value, you know, that it was the first station or the longest going.
This is where Hedges Station, you know that building up on Winfield Road, all the way up there? That house was right here for the longest time. And when the trains came by to either put the milk on or take off feed or stuff like that, then they would put it in this storage part on the west side of the depot, remember? And then someone would come along and take whatever came in. Yeah, the blacksmith shop, that was at the northeast corner up here. Other than Horseshoe, you know, he did iron work and stuff like structural iron work for railings and stuff too. What did they do in a blacksmith shop? What?
Make the horseshoes?
You're right, that's right. And they used to use coal to heat to get the metal warm so they could make the horseshoes.
And up the street was John Kosusnik had a blacksmith shop. We were young kids. It was still a blacksmith shop when I was a young boy.
Sure. We used to buy not a lot of stuff we didn't buy, but Mother occasionally would buy there. Oh yeah, he had good meat, and toward the end he did have like bread and a few other things that he sold. Yeah, that's where Alice Revac, where Revacs lived, and after they sold the house, is when they got the idea of putting, as we know it now, the shopping center there.
There was farms to the north of us where the Klein Creek is now. Mrs. Klein would bring in chickens and stuff, and we would sell them chicken feed, and we would sell them oil and vinegar and coal, and we would barter, and they would bring in their chickens. And every Friday night when my father was the butcher, all the ladies would come in and order their chickens for the weekend, so they have a big chicken fry on Sunday morning after church.
My great-great-grandmother started the Higgins store, and then my grandfather began to sell coal for people to heat their homes and businesses.
My mother never shopped for groceries, so she gave me a slip, we called it, a slip. So she'd say, Fritz, go down, and I'd hand it to Dick Higgins and or Grandma Higgins, and they'd fill it out. I'd either wait around or walk home, come back, and pick up the groceries. But they had everything.
Grandma Higgins was the greatest. You could charge your groceries, even if it was only 10 cents for bread. You could charge it, you know. And we used to like to go up to get that store-bought bread. And today I give anything for a home-baked bread.
I know when it was Pete Baum and Pete and his, 3 sisters? In fact, the glimpses, that first newspaper going way back, I think I got a copy of the 1932 Winfield paper. It's a little piece of paper about this big. It's orange, front and back, and that was it. And in the back of this, there used to be a little house there we used to call the smokehouse. Years ago, to keep your meats and stuff, if you didn't have an ice in your ice box, they would smoke the meat to store it. That would preserve it until they ate it. And that was what they call smokehouse. And they smoked it with hickory and apple wood and cherry wood.
Colonel Warren was donated this land and this property, and they proceeded to build a church here on this very spot where we're standing. In 1869, Bishop Dugan appointed a priest from Germany who was coming here, Father John Wiederhold. He was newly ordained. He served here as pastor for 52 years. And in 1882, saw the arrivals of Sister Paula, Euphemia, and Michaela, who were school sisters from the Diocese of Milwaukee. And they established a school here.
And when the new one was built, we thought that was tremendous. They had 4 classrooms upstairs. They only used 2. They still had the 4 classes in one room and 4 classes in the other, a music room, and the other one was vacant, or a library-like. And then down below was that what we thought was a big hall. And that's where the stage was, and that's where we had the plays continued, as Alan said.
It was a 2-room schoolhouse with a barn behind it and 2 odd houses, one for the girls and one for the boys.
Used to have picnics every year.
Oh yeah.
And when we had this old school yet, there was like an old mud basement underneath, and the ladies used to cook down there. There was a trap door on the outside. They would take you down in, and that's where they would cook all this chicken and all this good food and so forth. And then they'd serve it upstairs in the school.
In the school.
My class there were 7, 6 girls and 1 boy. I graduated in 1936.
There were 2 classrooms. So Skip and I had 2 teachers in our 8 years. We had 2 nuns, one for the first 4 grades and one for the second 4 grades. And in 1941, we moved to the building that's just the center of that, where the cross is on top. That was the new school. That was a big deal.
A lot of men did not have work, and they had the WPA, which was formed by the federal government. they would come out and do these. They built this bridge, that stonework, back in 1940, and they put to work a bunch of the old fellas who didn't have any, there's nothing to do.
Right. Then the walk for that bridge then was down lower on the east side. Remember, it was almost like a little wooden walk across the creek.
Boardwalk.
Boardwalk.
It was just vacant property, just weeds. Where the filling station is, they had a ballpark down there at one time.
Mr. Tinnis, he worked for the railroad for a long time with everybody, I guess, down there. He had the big orchard, and in the fall we couldn't wait for those apple trees to get those apples to get ripe. There were those hard winter sweet apples. Oh man! But we used to ball games down there in the corner, which is where the gazebo is now.
And then the public school grounds, you know, there was only one little room, schoolhouse, and on the back of it they had a ballpark back there. That used to be our entertainment of an evening or a weekend, you know.
What we played on the playgrounds, that was our football field, our baseball field.
Yeah.
That was where we played. All of us played there. They made it a pond so they could cut the ice and bring it into the ice house right there. They just drug it from the pond into the ice house. That's why they built that pond there.
They rented it out to somebody to sell bakery there in the southwest corner. Oh, and it was good bakery. I remember stopping there a lot.
Aaron was in World War I, and I think he came...
As a TB patient, he came out.
Yeah, he came out
From
as a
Chicago
TB.
as a TB patient and found Winfield. My Uncle Victor had his little pool room and bar and that, and lived with his family behind with one daughter, and they rented. And then that I remember in my years, Delighten had the post office here, and they lived behind.
Then Dahline sold it to Baumors, and then B. Baumor put a little addition on the right side of it for a Sears and Roebuck agency.
At the same time that they had that, Barbara and Lenore Schramer lived in the back. There was an apartment back there.
Winfield material.
My grandfather began to sell coal for people to heat their homes and businesses. It eventually expanded into building materials and sand and gravel and other products and home heating oil.
Yeah, we owned that corner at one time, Fritz and I did. It was a gas station, and before that there was a house there, the Schramer house. Yeah.
And behind Abbott's garage, there would probably be fenders, bottles, tin cans, anything you could think of. That was the village dump.
That was the dump, where everybody in town just took your garbage there and you threw it there.
And we used to go get all these old tin signs that they used to advertise. We'd get the tin signs, pull up the front, slide down the hill.
Yeah, in winter,
It was
snow.
any piece of tin or cardboard we could get down.
They were having the church picnics when I was a little kid. All the women cooked in the basement of the Forester Hall. It was called the Forester Hall at that time. It wasn't our fire station, and it was the Forester Hall. That was a social place for Winfield. When it was the Winfield Sanitarium, when it was the TB Sanitarium here, where our present hospital's at, they hauled coal almost 12 months of the year with a horse and a wagon. And this was a pretty good sized building. Their main building was, at that time, it was a pretty good sized building. But the sanitarium also had the outbuildings that they'd bring children from Chicago for the summer. And they were called cottages, and they would bring these kids out from Chicago.
At the TB Sanitarium, when it was first there, these patients used to live out, and they felt then that the cold that they slept in was doing them good for their lungs and stuff.
I think the big thing, there was so few people. And the big impact on us, besides St. John's, was the Jewish Sanitarium where the hospital stands. I mean, that was tremendous right here. You know, as kids, we played out there in the Indian mounds, which we played out there. We call it Player Woods. And the cattle had that all eaten down to grass, you know. And we played along the river, and along the river's a lot of gravel, so all these little holes were gravel pits, we call them. We'd play in those and play along the river, but I think the big impact was there's so few people.